Hey guys, it's Joe Carrell. Welcome to another episode of In the Mix. At this point, we almost have Diamond Dixie's Without Your Love finished up. It's sounding great. All it needs is that little finishing touch. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a look at our trip over to John Mayfield's mastering studio to get this thing sounding great.
Baby, you told me your love is something I can't live without. Well, honey, look how I'm doing. I'm just fine without your loving now.
I just got the call that my master's ready to listen to. I'm stoked. I'm gonna head over that way now. You gotta be careful though. Even though it's just a couple blocks away, this particular neighborhood in Nashville, there's some really shady characters. So I'm in John Mayfield mastering room. He's a good friend of mine. He's done several things for me over the years, and I always love what he does. Okay, so you know John's work. You've heard it before. Like in the pop rock world, let's throw out a name like Dave Matthews Band. In current country, like Jake Owens, Sarah Evans, Dolly Parton. There's a classic name for you. In Christian music, one of my all-time favorite vocalists ever is CeCe Winans. I know you've done some work for her.
Yep.
She's absolutely amazing. But anyway, John, thanks so much for being with us today, giving us a little bit of your time.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to Diamond Dixie, wow, you did a great job. I love it.
Well, I've got to hand it back to you too, because the mix came in sounding like it had all the analog warmth that it really needed, that really served the song. I don't know what you did, what processing you were using, but it was wonderful.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it was a lot of steps. In the beginning, hiring great players, our room sounds great. But honestly, the sponsor of this show is Warm Audio. That it was all their gear. Every microphone preamplifier used was theirs. Most of all the compression was theirs. Almost every microphone was theirs.
Right. That's awesome.
And then in the mix, I even used a lot of it. I used outboard compressors. I used their version of tube EQs across the stereo bus. Lots of stuff. I even did stems. Had like my vocal bus, my drum bus, my non-drum drum bus, going through preamplifiers of theirs, just to hit the transformer. So I think I gave you a lot of color.
I need to learn more about it.
All right, well, good. We'll talk about it later when we stop the cameras rolling.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Okay, so what I want to accomplish today, for the most part, is teaching some of these guys things that can make their own mixing, at the end result, their own productions, their own masters better. Maybe some of these guys have never, they're kind of new to the game, or they've been doing a lot of things themselves, and they're going to send something to mastering for the first time. And so maybe give us some input on, what you would like to see when you receive a file to make sure you can, it's what you need to work with to get the best result you can get.
You bet. Generally, a mix just sounds awesome.
Right.
That's the big key for me.
Right, yeah.
And what that defines is a mix that's just not smashed to smithereens.
Right.
And also is not overly dynamic, where your crest factor gets involved as being too broad, where I can't bring it up to competitive levels.
Right.
That is one of the issues nowadays, and it has been since the beginning of recorded music, is the level wars.
Right. I got you. Okay, so now let's set up a different scenario. Let's talk about a guy that, he's been in the game a while, and he's been mastering his own stuff, maybe running it through a brick wall limiter to make it nice and loud. But he's thinking, maybe I do want to send something out to a specialist and give this whole black art of mastering, a try. Are they going to make my tracks better? If these guys are going to send you something, give them a little advice on what they should or shouldn't do, to get you what you need.
Well, if they were mixing to their mastering DSP, then I want that file. I don't, even though it's way too loud and all that kind of thing, but it gives me a reference of where they were thinking. All right. And then that's the unfortunate part. If they were mixing to it, then if they pull that off, their mix is going to be irrelevant.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to be wrong. So there's sort of a conundrum there. So it would be smarter for them to mix sort of halfway between for me. Mix a little bit of sweetness on the 2-mix bus or in stems. I'm a real big proponent of using stems, because if you're doing that, then you've got, let's say you've got 4 stereo stems prior to the final stereo bus. Then you can put a little bit of DSP, a little compression, limiting, EQ, whatever, on each one of the stems. And that's going to be a lot less than what you would have ultimately done on the 2-mix bus if you were relying on the 2-mix bus to do it all.
Right.
So you've got a little bit of nice sweetness going on the stems, and by the time you get to the 2-mix bus, you're just barely touching it to stay out of, peak overs and all this kind of thing. So, to my way of thinking, that's a better way to mix, is to sort of prep for the level warm, but don't master it in your mixing process.
Right. Yeah.
Giving me a little bit of room with dynamic. I end up spending a lot of time in editing and gain value in certain elements of a mix. If there's not enough dynamic in a mix, I'll bring the level down in certain sections. If the breakdown doesn't come down enough, I'll drop it a half or a quarter or whatever to create a little bit more excitement when it comes out of it.
Right.
The intro is always altered, well, not always, but many times altered, because it's the level of the intro is dependent on the way the previous song ended. So if you don't leave me any room to work, to have some viability of dynamic, to give me a chance to schmooze it just a little bit.
Right.
So smashed mixes are not a great thing.
Yeah, that's essentially where I was going. A mistake I made early in my career. So I came up under an established veteran engineer that was mixing in the analog domain.
Yeah.
And that was back before Pro Tools and all that kind of things. So when I started performing my own mixes inside the box, I didn't have anyone necessarily looking over my shoulder telling me what to do or not to do. So something that I did wrong was print through, I think they call it, it's a brick wall limiter, basically.
Yeah.
And I was printing that. Yeah, it was impressive. It was nice and loud, right? And it sounded big. Well, at least loud. But the problem was, then when I sent that to a mastering engineer, he had nowhere to go. Because I'm a drummer, so transients are very important to me. So I had the snare, sounding the way that I wanted them to sound, and prior to putting the L2 on, a brick wall limiter. And after that, what I turned into probably a friend of yours, Alan Silverman in New York City was the guy, and my snare drums look like this.
Yeah.
He couldn't do anything with it. It was forever gone.
Yeah.
So it's probably, in a nutshell, leave the brick wall limiter maybe off.
Well, and,
the stereo bus.
I grew up in the analog world when I was recording and mixing back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And everything was analog. And honestly, the analog tape that we cut to had built into it a form of compression to begin with.
Right.
And it was the amount of that compression was all dependent on the level that you set your tape up at, how hard you were going to hit the tape. And that type of compression is something that's you can't get necessarily in the digital world. In the analog world, you can get it.
Right.
And it calms those peaks down a little bit.
Yeah.
Already, so that by the time you got down to mixing, well, you didn't have to do as much work. Mixing and living in the analog world was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Music sounded great back then.
Yeah.
At any rate, your mixes coming across have that analog feel. And I found that when I was mastering this cut here, it just came across the console, and I said, "Wow, did you cut that to analog tape, the whole thing?" Well, you obviously didn't, but you cut a lot of it with analog gear.
Yeah.
It sounds
Oh,
awesome.
good.
It really
Yeah,
is.
I appreciate that.
It really
I appreciate
sounded
that.
musical.
Real transformers and real tubes make a difference.
They must
And-
have it figured out.
And on the mix, I will tell you, I do stem. I set up subgroups and put for this particular mix, I had all those subgroups going through the WA-73, which is an old British style. So it's hitting a very colored transformer and doing what you're talking about doing. So that said, you probably now did you choose an analog chain? Did you choose a digital chain?
I chose a digital chain because your mix, it had the analog sweetness built into it.
Perfect.
And I really didn't have to. I didn't have to do any corrective work at all. It was all fun. It was all sweetening,
Good.
and it was just a real joy to work on. There was no defensive. I call it defensive mastering. When people throw me stuff that it's like, whoa, what? Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to fix that. But
Well,
no, your track was just awesome.
awesome. Well, you made it better, like you always do. One last thing I'd like to talk about before we break up for the day is that sometimes people start talking about different masters. Well, okay, I'm going to send this to a mastering engineer, and I want a radio version. I want my single version. I want my EP version. I want my streaming Spotify version. I want my so give us like the real story. What? Because I don't believe in a lot of that kind of stuff. So like when a song gets to you, tell me what you do. Like if it's going to be released on an album, it's going to be released to radio as well as it's going to stream. Obviously, it's going to stream.
Yeah.
Maybe they're going to do a vinyl. I know when we came in, Glenn was listening to a vinyl.
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts
Well,
on that.
there's pretty much a mandate going on nowadays. If the song comes in and it's going to stay in the digital domain, then I have to assume that it's being cut to CD. It's going to be issued on CD.
Right.
Now, if it's not even going to go to manufacturing, it's just going to be streamed. Well, there's an element of loudness management that's going on with all the streaming folks, all of them. But unfortunately, there's no standard. And so, but there is one of the streamers, I'm not going to mention the name, that you can go deep into the settings and turn off loudness management and actually get a full-scale value back. In essence, the CD level.
The way you intended it to be set.
That I mastered it for going to CD. There's one. And because of that caveat, and very few customers even know about it, I have to master at CD level, even though it's not going to CD.
Right.
That's the unfortunate thing. Now they're trying to defeat the level wars. I'm praying that they actually do. Loudness management is working. The Calm Act passed by Congress has addressing broadcast is a step in that direction. But unfortunately, I have to stay loud, except if it's going to vinyl. If there's a vinyl release, that's a completely different mastering session. And I tell the client, all right, one day we're going to do the CD. The next day I'm going to come back. I'm not completely redo it, but the levels get pulled 6 or 8 dB down, so that all the life of the music can come back. Because in vinyl, all I'm doing is prepping for the electromechanical deficiencies in vinyl, such that when the transfer person gets it to go to the lacquer, transfer to lacquer, he doesn't have to pull his hair out and do a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
And what I'm looking for is dynamics in vinyl. That's where vinyl sounds awesome.
Right.
If you send a squared off waveform to vinyl, it's not going to work. It just doesn't work. It sounds awful. It doesn't work.
All right. Gotcha.
So it's got to be redone. So level wise, we're in a sort of a conundrum. at this point, and I'm hoping that before I have to end up retiring 15 years from now, that they've got it figured out somehow.
Yeah. So right now, basically, you're doing one primary master. That's gonna be on a CD, or would be CD release.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
gonna be on YouTube. That's gonna be on Spotify. All that kind of stuff. That it's a single master, with the exception of a band that wants to issue a vinyl. Then
Yeah.
you're doing an alternate version.
I've had one client call me and say, "Okay, John, I want you to issue for a CD, and I want you to issue for streaming. And your streaming, I want it to be at -12 LUFS, loudness, units, full scale." And I said, "That's awesome. That's great." Because there was probably about maybe 4 or 5 dB in overall level, and the mix just was awesome.
Good deal.
The low level.
Yeah, right.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, but unfortunately, you have to do what? Turn your volume up?
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
no, I don't want to do
just
that.
Killed my mojo, man. Well, man, again, thank you for mastering, bringing your skills to
You
this.
bet.
And I know Diamond Dixie thanks you because they're thrilled with it. But hopefully that helps you guys, gives you a little information that you can use in your own mixing to maybe take it up, to the next step on your own masters, maybe bringing something to a guy like this. So as always, if you will, follow Warm Audio on social media and look up my own social media In the Mix with Joe Carrell. And if you're looking to have, if you're thinking about getting your song mastered, maybe this is the guy you need to look up. Should they look you up on social media or website?
The website is MAYFIELDmastering.com.
MAYFIELDmastering.com. We'll put a link in the bio or whatever to make sure you guys can find a way to look up John. So John, thanks as always, man. I
My
appreciate
pleasure
it.
indeed.
All right, thanks for watching. All right, guys, as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. If you haven't already, remember to follow Warm Audio on all their social media pages, and maybe take a minute to give them a big shout out for all this great educational content that they're providing. Also, follow me on my own pages at In the Mix with Joe Carrell. Now here is Diamond Dixie singing Without Your Love.
Do you think that I'm crying over you and still hung up on every word you say?